Back in 2022, I went on a road trip with my sister. We drove from Casablanca through Marrakesh, through the Atlas Mountains, to the Sahara Desert in Morocco. It was one of the most beautiful, impactful road trips on my life. And like any budding artist, I had a sketchbook with me. And one particular moment has always stood out to me as kind of really showing me for who I truly am. We were sat on this hotel balcony looking out at this absolutely incredible, probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It was the Casbah at Ain Ben Hadi. My sister and I were sketching away, and our host, Mohammed, walked up to us. Like any good Moroccan, he was there to give us tea, but he was excited to see that we were artists and wanted to look through my sketchbook. Of course, being polite, I obliged, and as he looked through my sketchbook, I could hear him going, "Oh. Oh." Well, you see, what he was finding was not sketches of the beautiful Moroccan vistas. It was simply page after page after page of Renault Kangoos. My name is Richard Hart. I'm an artist, and I am obsessed with Renault Kangoo. I think telling the story of the Kangoo and the story of why I'm so obsessed with the Kangoo can really be broken down into three specific eras of Kangoo. And so without further ado, this is part one. The joyous era of the Kangoo. In its inception, the Kangoo was the replacement for the Renault Express, which was the replacement for the Renault Fourgonette. The Renault Fourgonette. The Renault 4 van, essentially. And the Renault Express was essentially the Renault 5 van. And the Renault Kangoo was essentially the Renault Clio van. This was born in the era of Renault design that was dominated by their leading design visionary, the great man that is Patrick Leclermont, the father of the cute, adorable, cuddly, joyful era of Renault that gave us the Mark II Clio, the Twingo, the Scenic, cars that were like little bubbles running around. And the Kangoo was, to me, kind of peak of this era. Here was this little plumber's van, but it had such an adorable face. They're so cute, they're so endearing, they have so much character and personality. I think the Mark I Kangoo is such an endearing car, and it sits among a range of so many endearing cars. If you think about the Twingos and Clios of this era, Renault was really on a roll with just spreading joy, spreading happiness. It was an era of such kind of crazy creativity as well. There were many different variants of the Kangoo. You could get a pickup truck, you could get a long wheelbase. They did an early camper van in this era, which was called the Kangaroo, which I think is the cutest name you could have for the cutest little camper van. The original concept car, though, that this was all born from, actually wasn't as cute. Like, they added cuteness from the concept era. The concept car that preceded the Kangoo was called the Renault Pangaea, and it was sort of like a silver spaceship caravan tow car driving about the Pangaean desert with people in silver spacesuits. A pretty quirky looking van, very creative in all the different kind of fold out, pop out things that it had. Definitely not as cute as the production car. I think what really helps the cuteness is the under eyes that the OG Kangoo had. It's the same as the Twingo. I think adding the orange reflector underneath the kind of bubbly eyes just gives it that character of a smiling child or a happy puppy. There's something so adorable, you just want to squeeze them. They're so cute. This cute era of the Kangoo was kind of short-lived. In the early 2000s, the Kangoo received a facelift. In this, to sort of celebrate and welcome this facelift, there was a concept car which was called the Renault Kangoo Breakup. And actually the tech that went into the Kangoo Breakup did come to the Kangoo before they broke it up and made it look less cute. So that was the Kangoo Trekker, four-wheel drive off-road Kangoo with the drivetrain from the Renault Scenic XR4. I think this is peak Kangoo if you can find one of these pre-facelift, because the facelift, the breakup concept and the production Trekker, and indeed all Kangoos had, really toned down the Kangoo. I kind of get why they did it, because this is when Renault moved into their architectural era of madness, and this was kind of peak Patrick Leclermont crazy design. We're talking the Aventine, we're talking the shaking that ass Renault Megane. I kind of love the wackiness and the wildness and the craziness of this era of Renault, and I believe Patrick once said in an interview that he kind of felt they pushed it too far, but I'm like, you didn't push it far enough. Like, this era of Renault was so mad, and yet this is probably one of the safest looking Kangoos. I think this facelift kind of took away quite a lot of the magic that the Kangoo had. Fortunately though, it still had colour on its side. A lot of the colourful, bright kind of pastel colours were still very much in the Kangoo's roster, and that would lead through into the maddest era of Renault and the maddest era of the Kangoo. In the mid-2000s, Renault got really into bed with Nissan. This was the start of what's called the Renault-Nissan Alliance, and this was led by the CEO, Carlos Ghosn, one of the maddest automotive CEOs of all time. There's a brilliant documentary called Revenge of the Electric Car that pits Carlos Ghosn and Elon Musk in sort of like a automotive CEO who can make the best electric car battle. I think Bob Lutz is there for some reason as well. Well worth a watch, actually, if you want an insight into what Mr. Ghosn was like. And he made lots of crazy decisions, and there were lots of crazy Kangoos in this era, perhaps preceded by their obsession with bebop. There was like 6 or 7 Kangoo bebop concept cars before they eventually got to the production. And this was kind of the beginning of the Mark II Kangoo era. And with the Mark II Kangoo brought a scalable, movable chassis design that meant there could be a standard wheelbase, a long wheelbase, but what was really bizarre and what they bebopped the hell out of was the extra short wheelbase. These shortened Kangoos came in a normal variant called the Kangoo Compact. You could actually buy a Kangoo Compact with a Mercedes badge if you so wanted. But what was really bizarre about this was the Kangoo Bebop. This was a convertible like no other convertible, a car like no other car. I don't know who they thought wanted this. I don't know what they thought this was for, but it's sort of a half convertible, but it converts forwards with a side opening rear door. Short wheelbase, we're talking smart car kind of short, Renault Kangoo. Who wants this? Who is this car for? I don't know, but I'm glad that the madness, the epitome of the mad era of Renault, graced us with the Bebop. And to me, it's ultimate. Like, if I was ever a rich guy car collector, I would want one of these in my collection. This has to go in my obscure car museum. I'm obsessed with the Kangoo Bebop. This is where kind of the mad era of Renault Kangoos slowly starts to draw to a close. With the Bebop also came the ZE concepts, and the Kangoo was a key part of Renault's zero emission outlook. It was something that Carlos Ghosn was obsessed with. It gave us cars like the Zoe, the Twizy, that weird fluence, better place thing, and as well as the electric Kangoo. And the electric Kangoo did have some weird variants. There was a hydrogen hybrid version that had a diesel heater, so it was a electric, diesel and hydrogen powered car. I can't think of a single other car that has 3 different powertrains. This did also lead to Renault's kind of most uninspiring corporate face, and like all of the Renault models in this era, the Kangoo got it, and in fact it's the face that my Kangoo has. I think it's one of the least interesting corporate faces. And we can see in Renault's current sort of retro revolution, Daft Punk kind of era of design that they're moving away from this. I'm glad that they are, but they haven't with the Kangoo. And this is what leads me on to the tragedy, the tragic era of Kangoo, the Kangoo Mark III. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to expose you to primer grey. This is the greyest, most miserable, least interesting. It's just a normal van. I don't care about this. I don't care about the Mark III Renault Kangoo. It's not interesting. I don't care about it. It's the most boring era of Kangoo. It's the most monotonous era of Kangoo. It's lost all of the fun, all of the joy, all of the madness from the Kangoo. I think there is hope for the Renault Kangoo in that Renault has entered this Daft Punk era of design with the rebirth of the Renault 5, the Renault 4 and the Renault Twingo. I think the Kangoo is prime for a rebirth. I think it's prime time that the joy, the creativity, the character that the OG Kangoo had comes back, because the new one is just so miserable. Fortunately, there's one place in the world that is keeping this joy and this vigour and this madness alive well within the era of Kangoo tragedy. And that is where I have to get onto the cultification of the Renault Kangoo. You see, the Kangoo's gained a cult, and I mean cult following, in Japan. The Japanese have created this whole micro industry around modifying Kangoos with this sort of retro JDM, like making a modern car look old and quirky, colourful, bright, joyous way of modifying Kangoos, and I'm obsessed with it. Every year they have an annual meeting in the shadows of Mount Fuji called the Renault Kangoo Jamboree. Renault treats this as like such an honoured event, and they'll always present everyone there with a special Kangoo, and it's usually just a normal Kangoo that they've painted yellow, but they will put it on stage like it's at Glastonbury and cheer it like crowds. It's one of the top #1 events in the world that I would want to go to. Everything I've seen of the Renault Kangoo Jamboree, I'm like, get me there. I need to go to Japan. I need to see this for real. And the cottage industry that's grown up around making the sad, miserable era of Kangoo the happy, joyous era of Kangoo is so inspiring. For a long time, the Kangoo actually found itself as the #1 non-Japanese imported vehicle in Japan. That's how much they love them and how big this scene goes. And yet we don't think of them as a kind of car that has any sort of enthusiast scene over here in the West. I'd almost like to see that change. I'd like to see other people appreciate the Kangoo for what I appreciate it to be. I'd like to see people see the joy, the bubbliness, the charm that I get out of them. Designers see the value in creating a joyful, cheery, happy product, and that not everything needs to look sad and miserable. That bright and colourful is also a way to make a small cargo van.